Okay. Well, thank you very much, Holly. Glad to be here. I will share my screen here. So, and just a little bit of background on me. Um, I'm in private practice in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm a chiropractor by trade. Before that, I used to work in the electronics industry for companies that developed wireless technology that was basically the precursor to 5G. I had my own health issues that caused me to transition out of engineering and into healthcare. And I really thought that, that whole electronics industry thing I left behind. I really wanted it in the past, but it came back and it reared its ugly head and decided to affect health. And so I had to get involved. And so what I'm going to talk about tonight is 5G technology, which is short for fifth generation technology, specifically wireless technology. And you may have seen some of these in the streets or in your neighborhood. These are both 5G, what's called small cell towers. So you can see one on the left. This is right in front of somebody's house, retrofitted under the lamppost. And on the right, we have a fake tree that's actually a wireless tower that's been retrofitted to look like a fake tree, because they think if they just hide it, that you won't care. You may have seen these in other locations. Unlike your normal 4G tower that's 250 feet in the air and 2 miles from your home, these are, on a lamppost, on a signpost, on a street light, in your neighborhood, and they're going up everywhere. Okay. And so what I'm going to talk about tonight is why this is something you should definitely be upset about, what the health effects are, as far as human health, the environment, animals, plants, all that stuff. And we'll also dig into things like how it affects property values, how it infringes upon your privacy and security. Because we'll definitely talk how it infringes upon just more than just your right to your health, but also to your right to privacy and your right to your possessions and things like that. So, like I said, these 4G towers, the previous generation, these towers were much farther apart, much higher in the air, which was actually better because when something like this is giving off loads of radiation, you don't want to be close to it, okay? But now these small cell towers, because they're so close to us, they can give off way more radiation. So if you think of you're going to make a 5-bar call on your phone, you need about 0.002 watts, okay? It says a tenth of a watt. You don't even need that much, okay? But these towers can give off up to 5,000 watts, all right? And that's because part of the reason is that they're just so close. You can see in this picture, this tower was about 50 feet in the air and about 50 feet from someone's home. And this family, within 3 weeks of this tower going up in front of their house, and this was in California, their children were diagnosed with radiation sickness, and this family had to spend $10,000 to shield their home from this tower that they couldn't say no to. All right. And so these towers, like I said, can give off 5,000 watts. You need 0.002 watts to make 5-bar call on your phone. So it's giving about 25 million times more power than you need to make a call. All right. And that's because they want to send lots and lots of data, which we'll talk about as we go on here. So the industry likes to say, oh, well, this is safe. It's safe technology and it's non-ionizing radiation, so it can't harm you. The actual science says otherwise. And this is actually how radiation, specifically the type of radiation that these 5G towers give off, called microwave radiation, is one of the most studied phenomena in science as far as it affects human health. We've actually got 20,000 peer-reviewed studies going back over 100 years on how microwaves can cause cancer, sleep disruption, heart problems, infertility, DNA damage, headaches, anxiety disorders, the list goes on, okay? And I have data on this if you want to see it, but like we can see in this lower right corner, it shows all of these different levels, and then what effect it has, and then what study it shows that. And there's a link there which I can send to you guys. In fact, I'll punch this into the chat for you guys, so you can pull it up yourself. Let's see here. How do I get back to the chat?
If you hover at the top, does it, or the bottom?
Yeah, I minimized everything and now I can't get back to it. Oh no. Maybe if I unshare for a second. Oh, here we go. So you can download that if you want. We'll go back to sharing. That's a very important piece of data because that has links to like every study and exactly what harm they caused and at what levels of radiation. So the industry likes to say, and all your like Reddit nerds and people who think they know everything and just quote industry propaganda will say, well, it's non-ionizing radiation, so it's not harmful, meaning that it doesn't cause atoms to actually break into ions and therefore it can't harm you. The study is very clear that radiation doesn't have to be ionizing to cause harm. This is some DNA. On the left, we have control, not exposed to any radiation. On the left, we have some DNA that's been exposed to gamma rays, which are definitely ionizing. This is the strength of about 1,600 chest X-rays, and you can see the DNA damage, okay? Now, on the right, you can see non-ionizing rays from a cell phone over a 24-hour period, and you can see that it also caused DNA damage. So radiation does not have to be ionizing to cause DNA damage, and as you can guess, DNA damage leads to cancer and other problems down the road. One other thing is that the radiation, this radiation from cell phones and cell towers can damage our red blood cells. And our red blood cells are what transport oxygen from our lungs. Like the oxygen comes in through the air, we breathe it in, it goes into our lungs, and then diffuses into our blood, and it's carried by our red blood cells, which have something called hemoglobin, which carries oxygen in the blood from the lungs out through all the tissues, to every organ, gland, muscle, ligament, bone, whatever. The red blood cells are carrying the blood. And so they're adversely, if these red blood cells that carry your oxygen throughout your body are adversely affected by radiation, okay? So this is just low exposure, okay? We can already start to see that these red blood cells are starting to clump together, all right? And this inhibits their ability to transport oxygen. Now, this is exposure to a cell phone that's been communicating with a cell tower. All right, now we start to see what are called rouleau formations, where these red blood cells are sticking to each other like a roll of quarters. Okay, and their ability to transport oxygen is even more inhibited. All right, and then this is with like a really bad exposure. The morphology, the shape of the red blood cells actually changes, all right? And their ability to transport oxygen is even more inhibited, all right? Now, you might have heard of a certain disease that when you get it, your body's ability to uptake and transport oxygen is inhibited. It's kind of been going around for the past year and a half. I won't name any names, but it is kind of strange that the effect that, one of the effects that microwave radiation can have on you is one of the symptoms of said disease. I'm not saying that they're necessarily causally related or even correlated, but draw your own conclusions, okay? Children are the most vulnerable to this stuff, okay, because they have thinner skulls and their bodies are a higher percentage of water, all right? So they are the most vulnerable to radiation, and they're the ones that we got to protect the most. One of the things that radiation can also do, another harmful effect, is it can break down what's called the blood-brain barrier. So normally your brain has a barrier to protect things that can normally float around in the blood, but keep them from going into the brain and getting actually into the brain, like heavy metals and other persistent toxins that you really don't want in your brain that can cause brain damage and other problems. We see that when rat brains are exposed to cell radiation, that actually causes disruption to the blood-brain barrier, and now stuff that shouldn't get into the brain from the blood leaks into the brain, okay? So this is just 2 hours at 915 megahertz, which is a common wireless phone frequency. Right? You can actually see the perforations in the brain on a rat brain. Okay, so and now this is up close. You can actually see holes. Okay, and this is where toxins can get in. So if there's mercury or aluminum from a vaccine or polysorbate 80 you know, PCBs or any sort of environmental pollutant, these are getting into the brain. Okay, aluminum is something we find on autopsy in people with dementia, people with Parkinson's, kids with autism. Okay, it's responsible for a lot of neurological damage, and this is giving us some idea of how it's getting up there. Okay. This is, for example, we see a neuron here gets exposed to just the tiniest little bit of mercury, and after 20 minutes, the neuron is what's called denuded. Its axon is kind of collapses, and it loses functionality. Okay, so radiation not only affects the brain, like we talked about, not only affects the red blood cells, not only causes numerous health effects, but it also harms plants. I don't know if you guys have seen the pictures of, there was a 5G tower that went up on the west side over in Avondale next to 2 palm trees. Within a month, both the palm trees had collapsed and died. Okay, it kills insects. You look up on YouTube, search beehive and cell phone. People put a cell phone near a beehive and all the bees fly away. Okay, so, and if we kill the bees, we kill the pollinators. Well, we kill our ability to grow plants, or kill our ability to grow food. It's really a pickle if that happens. So it has far-reaching effects beyond just us and our kids. That it affects plant life, it affects animal life, it affects so many things. Okay. Here's another thing. In the state of Arizona, the big tech companies have set it up such that they are not liable. Okay, because they've set up what are called shell companies, which actually build and set up the towers and own the towers, and then the wireless companies just rent the location from them. So when lawsuits will inevitably come in for the health harms caused by this, people will sue these shell companies, which essentially have no assets, and go bankrupt. And then our cities, our municipalities are left holding the bag, while T-Mobile and Verizon and Sprint and all those guys just get off scot-free. Okay. Another problem is that when a tower goes up near a home, okay, or really any building, is that we see that neighborhood property values drop by 20%. So we've been trying to tell the municipalities this, like, look, when these towers go up, people are gonna move away, they're gonna lose value in their homes, and your tax revenue is gonna take a 20% dip. And I don't think any city in Arizona has the wiggle room in their budget to afford a 20% dip in revenue. Lastly, and this, this one, because you guys are focused on people's rights, this is the big one. 5G is essentially enabling a surveillance state, okay? Because these microwaves can take near nude photographs of you, all right? They can listen in on your conversations. They can essentially spy on you, mine your data, sell it to third parties, including foreign entities, all without your consent or knowledge. Okay, so it's creating the infrastructure for a security state, for a surveillance state, by allowing us to basically monitor everything that's going on constantly. And being that it's wireless, it's also not secure. So ne'er-do-wells, foreign governments, whomever can hack into this infrastructure and eventually cause harm. So really, what we are trying to do is get the cities to see this and put a stop and put a moratorium on this kind of thing. And what we're advocating for is instead doing what's called wired technology. Okay, so instead of beaming the internet down at everybody from the sky, okay, and shooting everybody with microwaves, what we do is we do what's called fiber optic cables. This is a picture of a fiber optic cable here. We route the internet underground, okay, and everybody gets high-speed fiber optic cable to their home, to their business, to their church, to their school, to whatever, to the library, and everybody has cheap, high-speed internet access. It's faster than 5G. It's safer than 5G. It's more secure than 5G. The cities can regulate it as a public utility and actually be a source of revenue for the city, as opposed to them getting sued for these towers going up that they're allowing. And okay, maybe you won't be able to watch Netflix in your car, but Everybody gets high-speed access to the premises and can use wireless and Wi-Fi if they want, and people that are electrically sensitive don't have to. So I would love for you guys, I have a couple of documentaries I mentioned here, Generation Zapped and 5G Trojan Horse, definitely worth checking those out. If you want to get involved in what we're doing, and we need people involved to work, especially with city governments. We're really trying to fight this at the city level, and I'll talk a little bit about why. But we'd love for you guys to have go on azforsafetech.org, and you can put in your contact info, get plugged into our email list, learn about events that we're doing, learn about ways to affect change. Because basically in the state of Arizona, they've created a law that the cities can't say no to the towers. They created a law back in 2017, basically saying, well, the wireless companies can submit an application for a permit, and the cities basically have to approve it. Okay, it's like a strong arm law. So even if no one in the neighborhood wants the tower, you can't say no, right? So it puts us in a pickle. So what we're doing is, like I talked about in one of my very first slides, where it's too much power coming off these towers. But the cities can do what's called a wireless ordinance, and they can cap the power coming off of these towers. So instead of 5,000 watts, it's 1 watt or a tenth of a watt or something like that. So it's enough power coming off the towers to make your 5-bar call, but it's not enough power to zap you with tons of radiation, download Netflix in your car, surveil you, devalue your property, all that stuff. So we get the benefits of the wireless towers without all the harms. And so right now we're very close to getting a wireless ordinance written in Chandler and in Tucson. And we hope that once one of those cities writes one, then we can get the other cities to follow suit. But no one wants to be the first to go, okay? Because there's a lot of pressure from the industry. You can't do this, and a lot of these, city council people are afraid of getting sued and what have you. But this is our best method. But we need numbers to be able to put the pressure on the city councils to pass the wireless ordinance, and that's kind of where we're at. So I hope that explains things. I know that was kind of rapid fire. I went through a lot of stuff. If it's new to you, and maybe I went too fast, or maybe I cut some corners and explain everything, but I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Okay, awesome. Roxy has a question. You have to unmute, Roxy.
So years ago, I worked in Fountain Hills. Fountain Hills, they don't have telephone lines. They do have light poles. So do they have it on the light poles, or can they put it under the ground?
I'm not sure what you're asking exactly.
Okay, Fountain Hills. Okay, so I noticed they have it up there on the. I installed fiber cable. That was before the fiber optics put in. We would use a bucket truck, go up and put that and all the LEDs and stuff in. Okay, Fountain Hills, when I did that, they don't, if you drive through Fountain Hills, you'll notice there's no telephone poles anywhere. So they don't have the 5G up on the lines like you showed. They may have it on the telephone pole or the light pole. So I'm just wondering, have you approached Fountain Hills?
No, we haven't gotten involved with Fountain Hills. We don't have anybody in our group who's really in that city or too active. So I don't know what the scenario is over there, honestly.
Well, it might be a good place to go because they don't want wires all through their city. That's why they took it. Everything is underground. There's nothing. You won't have any cable wires above. You don't have any electrical wires above. They're all under the ground.
So,
Sure.
So what you're suggesting is that maybe he could approach their city council first because they're already open-minded, because they've already set up their community against that kind of thing.
Right. Maybe so. Might be a good place to go. But I wondered where they put it. And if they don't, they'd probably just put towers up. I wonder if they allowed them. I'm going to drive through Fountain Hills. I'm curious.
All right. So as I understood your presentation, which I really appreciate, 5G is a 5,000 watt radiation that gives a lot of technology benefit, but not enough to offset the health risks and the privacy security risks that it's doing. Is that right?
Pretty much. I mean, it's like, is there any amount of technology benefit that can it give to, if it's causing that much harm? It's like, like what? I mean, at some point we got to make a trade-off. But yeah, that is basically it. That it promises all this stuff, yet no one, it sweeps under the rug that it causes all this harm. And that's a good point to bring up. I used to work in the wireless industry. We never tested anything on humans or like had to do safety tests. We had to test if it worked and it did what we said it did, and the equipment worked, but we never had to like test that it was safe on humans. The FCC never required that, and it still doesn't. So it's not even on these people's radar to test for that, because they never have been held accountable to that kind of standard. So yeah, that's basically what's going on.